Eliot Hine Network 1 on YouTube.
DCPS Career and Technical Education.
I'm your host, Cooper Hanks.
I'm your host, Ryan Stedemeyer.
I'm your host, Vivian Asman.
I'm your host, Madeline Allen.
Did you know the Eliot Hine Network has a new podcast and state-of-the-art studio?
Focusing on Apple,
iHeart,
Spotify,
Pandora,
Google,
and Amazon Music.
Joining us as a guest on the show today is AFT President Randi Weingarten.
Hang on.
Wow.
Our show topic is education, healthcare, and public service through the AFT.
President Weingarten, thank you for joining us today.
Oh my God, I cannot believe I am joining you for like your first show in this amazing studio. I am honored to meet all of you.
Our first segment is Understanding AFT's President, Randi Weingarten.
What advice would you give to a student to prepare for a career in your field?
You mean other than praying? So, seriously, first off, what you're doing right now is preparing for a career in our field. It is about a few things. One is you have to love the work. So, and you have to really want to make a difference in the lives of others. Because so many things can go wrong that if you don't actually love that and fall back on that, then, you don't have a value system to fall back on. So that loving, and I love every single day, I get to do the work to help kids get an education, help people heal from illnesses because I represent so many different nurses and things like that, help make government work better, and then also work as a labor movement so that all these folks who teach, who nurse, who are public employees, that they get a decent wage, they get child care, they get a decent retirement, they too get decent health care so that they can support their families. So I've gotten to how lucky can I be that I get to do this work. So number one, you gotta love the work. Number two, all the things you're doing in education is really important. And it's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. This is why I love, love, love your career tech ed program, because you are learning resilience, you're learning relationships, you're learning to critically think, you're learning to problem solve. That kind of stuff is really, really important. And then practicing and doing this like a first podcast, that's amazing. So it's both loving the work, and the second is preparing by creating the skills, and the third is relationships. And so how you create relationships. So, for example, I'm here with you today because you were at our amazing conference on career tech ed and got to interview Governor Moore and then, said, okay, we want to interview you too. So that was relationships. That was because your amazing teachers got you to a conference that we were doing. We were like, yes, students should cover this conference. And then that then became a relationship that got me to your amazing studio. So relationships really matter in that kind of way. Those three things.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Second question, what does a normal day at your job look like, and what are some of the main things that you do?
So I probably don't actually have a normal day, meaning almost every day is different. So today, for example, I live in New York City. So I got on a plane this morning to come here so I could be here on time. So I took a 7:48 plane from LaGuardia so that I could get to Reagan Airport to be here. And then this afternoon, I'm meeting with the Federal Reserve. Now that's not a normal day to meet with the Federal Reserve, but it's all the union leaders in the nation and so we're preparing first, and then we're going to have a meeting with the Federal Reserve. Tomorrow, I'm going all the way to California because I'm presenting at a huge conference on the labor movement to lots and lots of different people. Wednesday, I'm going to the Congress and lobbying about, a lot of different Congress people on education, on health care, on all sorts of different things, on safety and security. And then I get to Wednesday afternoon be with the First Lady of the United States of America because it's Teacher Appreciation Week. So the head of the NEA and the head of the AFT, me, we're going to meet with and have a podcast just like this with the First Lady to say thank you to teachers. So that's why I'm saying, so what I try to do a normal day, I get up really early in the morning. I used to stay up really late at night. I can't anymore. I do my homework in the morning. That's when I do my homework, and I do a lot of homework. I have I love orange, you can tell. I have something called an orange file. That's my homework file, and I try to go through my homework file in the morning. And then I try to do a bunch of phone calls that I have to do. And the last thing I try to do every week is I try to be in a school or in a healthcare, like a nursing home or a healthcare institution, or with my members at least once every week somewhere in the country.
Thank you.
How do you work with other people in your job? Is teamwork important to what you do?
Yes, absolutely. Nobody can do this alone. And all those people who think they can do it alone, they need to actually think about who really truly has helped them. And so you have to work with people, and that means you have to respect them, and that means you have to really listen. And sometimes you got to listen more than you talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. If you could select one word to describe your work ethic, what would it be and why?
Gratitude.
Mhm.
Now, that wouldn't have been my word years ago. I probably was much more hard charging years ago when I was trying to prove something. But I'm really, really, really grateful to the people we serve. We have 1.75 million members. It's a lot of people. And all over in 45 different states and territories, including in Washington, D.C. We represent the teachers here. But I'm grateful for the work they do, and I'm grateful for the staff that I have. And that's a practice to show that gratitude. It is constantly, I have to constantly improve. So if you have my job, you got to be a hard worker. Yes, of course. But it's the gratitude and the respect that I try to show other people, and I'm always learning.
We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This podcast is being brought to you by Eliot Hine TV on Ustream.
And the District Knowledge Network.
I'm your host, Madeline.
I'm your host, Nora.
I'm your host, Jabria.
I'm your host, Jade.
Our show topic today is education, healthcare, and public service through the AFT.
Joining us as a guest on our show is AFT President Randi Weingarten.
Our first segment was Understanding AFT's President Weingarten.
Our second segment is Real Solutions for Kids and Communities.
Talk to us about the partnerships you gave away to 2 million books.
So,
in July 2024.
we, this week, we will be giving away our 10th millionth book. But we started a new program as part of that right here in DC called Reading Opens the World. So for the last 10 years, we've been working with this group called First Book, who figures out with publishers, I don't know how they do it, but they get books that normally would cost like $10, $20 for like $2 or $3 or even less. And so the deal is that if we work with them, we can get these books to communities, to kids, to communities that maybe, that have kids who are in poverty. We can, that's part of the deal that the publishers give us to have cut rate prices. So we've worked with them on this, and the books that we get are books that are really diverse. So like a book about Rosa Parks, a book about Anne Frank, a book in Spanish or in Arabic or, in French. So so a book about Star Trek, chapter books, Disney books, so that kids look at the books and say, oh, I want to read this book. And what we want to do is make sure that classrooms have libraries of books that kids want to read, young adults want to read. And, if you're a kindergartner, you're not going to read the same book as if you were your age. So, and we want to make sure that kids and families have books at home. And so all of this is about a love of reading. So we thought if you really want to talk about a love of reading, you got to do something about it. Talk is cheap. So that's why we've been doing these Reading Opens the World events, getting books to people, doing readings like in a library. We've done that a couple of times in DC. But what we really love doing is like on a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon, or like in the summer in an afternoon, have a big fair. So you'll have bouncy houses, or you'll have food trucks, and you'll have other types of things. And that's what we're doing this weekend in 5 different places in the United States to basically give out our 10th Million book.
What objective of your community schools initiative?
So community schools, we always think about in the United States, there's not a lot of really positive things that people see government doing. I wish there was. You did great. You did great. I understood what you were saying. And, it's a mouthful. But there's not a whole lot of positive things. One of the most positive things that government does is to say that every child in America has to get a good education. So sometimes you want to go to school, sometimes you don't want to go to school. I saw when I came in that, that the school is trying for 90% attendance, and you're like, you go from, like in September, you had like 95%, now you're at 88%, but that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. People want to be here. You want to be here. Mm-hmm. But what happens if, somebody doesn't have glasses and can't see a, whiteboard or a chalkboard? Do you still have chalkboards every now and then?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That was in the
Not
dinosaur
really.
time. That's when I taught. I taught with chalkboards. But, what happens if we don't have, like, a really good, nutritious lunch? What happens if something's going on at home and there's some challenges and you want to talk to somebody? So what community schools are is like, how do we wrap these services around school? What happens if parents just came to this country, are not bilingual yet, and want to learn English? Saturday school, adult ed. What happens if we want to have like afternoon basketball instead of going home and nobody may be home? So community schools are kind of like, how do we wrap these kind of services around a school so that the school really functions as helping everything, every aspect of your life, and not just your life, but your parents' lives. That's what a community school is. And not every community school does everything, but what we're trying to do is make sure we have a system and a process so that if a school community, parents, kids, the teachers, administrators say, we really need this, how do we get that here instead of somewhere else in Washington, D.C.? Because if you actually had, for example, a checkup service, healthcare, like so you would have a physical once a year at the school, isn't that better than trying to go to a doctor somewhere else? So that's what the community school, that's the idea behind it.
Thank you. In your opinion, why is career and technical education beneficial for students?
So think about what you're doing right now. So you are learning by doing. I don't know about any of you, but I always had a hard time learning by testing. I always had an easier time learning by doing, by like really engaging in the work. And so career tech ed is a lot more learning by doing. And then what happens in a bunch of the subjects in career tech ed, you can get a certification that you can go to, a work site and say, hey, I just got certified in welding. You can hire me. Sometimes a welder is going to make more than a teacher. You can hire me because I now have learned how to do it so well that I've gotten this certification. So say you all want to be broadcast journalists. Think about what you're doing right now, the skills that you're learning. So that's why I love it so much. And when I taught, again, in the dinosaur age, when I taught in the 1990s, I taught in New York City. I was an AP Gov teacher and a social studies teacher, but I taught at a school called Clara Barton High School for the Health Professions, which was a CTE school, a career tech ed school. And so my kids, a lot of my kids, were also training to go into, they were training to be dental hygienists, they were training to be LPNs, and they really were training to go into healthcare on top of all of this. That's why
Thank
I
you.
love it.
What are some things that AFT is doing to protect the mental health and well-being of a student?
So there's a couple of things that we're doing. One is the positive, and one is the fight back against the negative. We like really trying to do problem solving as opposed to just calling out a problem. How do you solve it? So on the positive, we're fighting to have social workers and guidance counselors and these kind of services in schools. So you have them. So, I know I was trained as a lawyer and as a teacher. I wasn't trained as a guidance counselor. I wasn't trained as a social worker. So how do I know sometimes if somebody's having a hard day? What do I need to do? What are the questions I should ask? How should I really try to make somebody feel safe? That's a strategy, but it's a skill that people learn. So that's why when we say social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, guidance counselors, they learn more of those skills all the time. So how do you have people like that in the school? The second is what I just said before about to Jabria, right?
Mhm.
About wraparound services. How do you have them in a school so you have that? The third is having things like, and you probably do this, restorative justice circles, restorative circles, having if there's been an issue, how do you learn the skills of talking it through in schools? So part of that is because look, people hurt us all the time, and there are issues all the time. So how do you go from being really hurt to actually talking it through with somebody who may have hurt you? And how do you get those skills, and how do you do that instead of it being fight or flight? How do you engage? So these are all skills that we try to teach kids. So that's the positive side. On the negative side, you see this?
Yes.
I shouldn't even have it up here because we shouldn't have these things in schools. How do we make sure that you're not fixated on the algorithm, or that you're not fixated on the text or things like that? And because what happens is, yeah, they're really important for communication in all sorts of different ways. But those social media companies do a lot of things with the algorithm to try to get you addicted to it. And so how do we stop that from happening? They'll say, those social media companies will say, oh, no, it's the parents, the parents' responsibility. No, the parents don't control the algorithm. A lot of these algorithms, just like sometimes other ways of addictive behavior, it's intended to get you to do it more, like automatic scroll, like all sorts of other things, like Instagram. It's intended to make you look at it over and over and over and over again. So how do we stop that from happening? So you communicate, have TikTok or have Instagram, but not let the harmful effects happen. So we fight back against these social media companies. So those are the positive: get services and help you get skills so that you can be resilient. Negative: how do you fight back against social media companies?
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This broadcast is being brought to you by Eliot Hine TV on Ustream.
And the District Knowledge Network.
I'm your host, Kamora.
I'm your host, Emmanuel.
I'm your host, Tony.
I'm your host, Amaje.
Our show talk today is education, healthcare, and public service through the AFT.
Joining us as a guest on our show is AFT President Randi Weingarten.
Our first segment was Understanding AFT President Randi Weingarten.
Our second segment was Real Solutions for Kids and Communities.
Our third segment is Take Action.
Yes.
How can we as young adults become involved in supporting initiatives by the AFT?
So number one, just showing up. Meaning, think about what we're doing right now. I'm here as your guest. We're creating a connection between the AFT and the union and you in a real way. You guys were at our big conference this year on experiential learning, where we were really trying to convince the world why it's so important to have hands-on learning and why it's so important to fund education. So when we're talking to students, it's really kind of showing up and being engaged and being engaged in your own destiny. That's what a union tries to do. How do we actually take power, create power, so we actually can move politicians and others to do the things that you need to be successful in life.
What is the American Rescue Plan?
So the American Rescue Plan, that's a really good question. The American Rescue Plan was one of the first bills that was passed right after Joe Biden became president. So you remember the COVID time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened during COVID is a lot of people lost their jobs. It was a huge pandemic. A lot of people were not working. A lot of schools, for example, also didn't have the ventilation or the kind of services that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of people had lost their jobs because the economy stopped for a while, you didn't have the money that was coming in to states and localities and to the federal government to actually make things happen. So what happened was the president said, there's a lot of things that we got to fix. Let's do a huge injection of money to get people, get ventilation systems in schools. Make sure that people still have health care if they don't have their jobs. Make sure that we can get small businesses some funding so that they can stay alive. That's what the American Rescue Plan was. It was a lot of ways, different ways to try to rescue all of us after what happened in COVID.
How can adults join the movement to stay connected to the AFT's political and legislative program?
So there's several ways we can do that. Number one, if they're a member, we have 1.75 million members.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're a member of the union, we want them to be connected. We want them to be involved. Because think about it, when you're more involved in something, is it more interesting or no?
Yes.
So if you get more involved, if you feel like you're part of your destiny, it's just something that, it's like when you come to school, hopefully it's more interesting than when you don't come to school.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to be more involved. So we have this poster in every school about telling people, see?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I can hold my mic and show the poster. See?
Mm-hmm.
See? So it's kind of like all the different things that people can have to get involved, trying to get people into what do you like? What do you want to do? Or like we can help you with student loans. We can help if there's a trauma issue. What can we do to help? Get involved. But the second thing is, if they're not members, we have a way to say, if you want to be involved, you can be a friend of the AFT. And it's a minor cost. It's a minor membership fee, kind of like on a, if you were joining like Planet Fitness. It's less than it costs to join Planet Fitness. And so you can be involved that way. And so, but we know when regular folks are involved, we can actually then help get people elected who believe in having a labor movement, increasing wages for regular folks, having good education, lowering the cost of college. And that's what we try to do.
Do you have any final thoughts for the students at Eliot Hine Middle School?
First off, I love the students at Eliot Hine Middle School. I just saw some pictures of the play that you all just did. I watched you when you interviewed Governor Wes Moore. I'm watching you right now. This is my advice. Enjoy yourselves at school. I saw the poster about how to be a better community. Be kind, work hard. More important than anything else, create a community amongst yourselves so that you help each other. Know that your teachers love you and want to make sure that you are successful and that we help you in every which way we can. We need you to be successful. We need you to fix all the things that we as adults have broken in this world. let's make sure we have a better world, one of love, one of opportunity, one where the climate is okay, one where there's peace and safety and security for everybody. So, but we need you to help us do that. And that means getting a decent education so that you're prepared for life, for career, for college, and to vote.
President Weingarten, thank you for being a guest on our show.
Thank you.
This broadcast is being brought to you by Eliot Hine Network 1 on YouTube.
DCPS Current Technical Education.
I'm your host, Corn.
I'm your host, Emmanuel.
I'm your host, Tony.
I'm your host, Amaje.
Thank you.
Have a great day.